Great to be back with all of you. Looking forward to our time together today. And we only have one more session after this, but this is really the beginning of a great journey, a great adventure for our lives. And seeing the power of leadership, that is what we're going to focus on today. Our topic is conscious leadership. So it's about leading with purpose, with authenticity, and with caring. You know, my favorite quote on leadership comes from Peter Drucker, who was the well-known management thinker, who said, there are only three things that happen naturally in organizations: friction, confusion, and underperformance. Everything else takes leadership. You could take the most brilliant, conscious, thoughtful, well-intentioned people, put them in a room, come back an hour later. What will you find? Friction, confusion, and underperformance. Until somebody steps into the role of leader, somebody takes on the responsibility of leadership to create a vision for where are we going? Where is it possible for us to go? A great leader can see beyond the horizon and create an inspiring vision. And how do we get there, right? So leadership is essential to channel all the extraordinary potential and capacities we have as individuals into something of great importance for the organization. Very simply put, why does leadership matter? Because better leaders make for a better world. And by the same token, bad leaders can destroy our civilization, can destroy our way of life. So having the right people and having those people elevated in their consciousness to function as highly conscious leaders is very, very critical in order for us to create the kind of world that we all want to live in and we want for our children and grandchildren to live in. You know, leadership has evolved as an idea. It's one of the most studied disciplines. There are thousands and thousands of books about leadership. But if you really boil it down, what has been the broad journey here? For the longest time, leadership was almost synonymous with military style leadership. It was command and control, right? It's a general at the top ordering all the troops, telling them exactly what to do. And of course, you know, that was in fact the dominant model that kings and others and army leaders, etc., used. And then when we started having this corporate sector, businesses started to grow into large entities, and they were looking for how do we lead and how do we manage and organize. They looked to the military. Armies were the only large organizations that existed. And so we borrowed the command and control approach to leadership, the hierarchical way to organize, the language of strategy, tactics, operations, front lines, staff line. These are all military terms. So we have borrowed a lot from the military. But the fact is that, you know, business is not war. We're not trying to destroy an enemy. We're trying to actually care for people and uplift their lives, right? So the military way of thinking gives us some value. It created some order and structure and discipline, but actually is not the right metaphor. Around 1970 or so, we moved from the military approach to the mercenary approach in the world of business. This is when Milton Friedman talked about, you know, the only purpose is to maximize profits. Shareholder value became the dominant dogma and paradigm. So the leaders were simply those individuals who had the best ability to improve financial performance. And they would go from company to company, almost like mercenaries, like a hired soldier, right? You can hire them and they will come in and fix your balance sheet and get the stock price up. But without regard to the people consequences of that, right? So it was purely, they had no motivation other than money. Mercenary by definition is somebody who only cares about money. So that became the dominant way of being for the last 50 years. And now we're in a transition towards what we would call missionary leadership, which is I'm trying to achieve something through my leadership. I'm trying to take people to a better place. It's not about me, it's about the mission. So now we're saying it's not a business with a mission, it's a mission with a business. We want to achieve this, and in order to achieve this, we need to create an organization that's going to do all the things that are necessary to bring about this vision and mission that we have created for ourselves, right? So that's kind of the broader shift, and conscious capitalism is a continuation or conscious leadership of that kind of leadership. So what is it? What is conscious leadership? What do we mean by that? It's really the word conscious that is key in that phrase. So if you go back to Carl Jung, as he said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. If you don't know what is driving your behavior, what is making you react in certain ways to things that happen in your life, right? You don't even understand yourself, and therefore your leadership is going to be highly reactive. And later on, I'll talk about the leadership circle profile as a way to actually judge and evaluate ourselves. To what extent are we, in fact, operating from that unconscious place, right? So we need to make the unconscious conscious, right? We need to understand the totality of ourselves. So what does it mean to be conscious? And this is a journey that we are all on in humanity, right? Conscious simply means to be awake, right? To see reality as it is, to understand the consequences of our actions. You know, when we were struggling just to survive, and billions of people, basically that was their life, all you could focus on was your own ability to stay alive. You couldn't think about the long-term consequences of your actions or the impact of your actions on others. But now we have to think about that, right? All of us, each of us, as we wake up, more and more, right? We are waking up constantly to a higher level. We have a greater commitment to the truth and a better sense of right and wrong. As I said, that which was acceptable in the past is no longer acceptable. Things like slavery, women didn't have the right to vote, colonialism, segregation in the United States, apartheid in South Africa, no gay rights, all of those things, these things have changed in the last 150 years or so, right? So we are on that journey of waking up, having a better sense of right and wrong. We are more peaceful, we are more inclusive, and we're learning to live in harmony with nature. And we need to bring all of this into our businesses. We need to bring all of this into our leadership, right? All of these aspects of being conscious. And when we do that, here's what we find. What do conscious leaders do? Well, they create an inspiring vision, right? This is what the world will look like when we achieve our purpose, when we do what we are intended to do here as a business. They manifest themselves the higher purpose. They embody what it is that our higher purpose is about. They live it. They also model the culture of the company. The core values that define our culture also define the leaders. They care about all the stakeholders. They don't just view them as a way to make more money. They actually say, how can I serve and how can I uplift and how can I align all my stakeholders around our purpose and values so that we have that in common. They're great storytellers, and that is a skill to be cultivated. This is how you engage people, not intellectually, but at an emotional, at a heart level, at a soul level, right? So we need to have that capacity. They are constantly learning and growing and evolving, and that sets the tone for the organization as a whole. They create a sense of urgency. It is later than we realize in so many dimensions, right? Whether it's the planet, the environment, social justice. I mean, there's so many things that are urgent, but they do that with a sense of patience. It's an interesting paradox, and that's one of the great things about conscious leaders. They can manage paradoxes and polarities. Things that seem opposite, you can actually bring them together, as we will talk about. And finally, they do the right things for the right reasons. You don't do the right things just because it's going to make you more money. You do it because it's the right thing to do for people. Right? So again, we need to always keep that lens. There's a strong ethical, moral component to conscious leadership. Now, what you're not as a conscious leader, you cannot be selfish. You cannot be about, oh, how does this serve me and how can I use this position to advance myself? They don't use their power in a bullying way, right? The command and control. They're not greedy. They're not just focused on their own wealth. They're not hungry for power. They see power as a means to a noble end, not as a means, as an end in itself. They certainly have humility, right? They're not arrogant and they're not insecure. They have a strong sense of self, understand who they are, and they respect themselves. And they have a broader sense of what leadership is about. This is something I learned from Bob Chapman when I did the book Everybody Matters with him. I thought leadership was about what happens Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. And he said, no, the leaders are the stewards of the lives entrusted to them. The way we lead profoundly impacts the way people live. It impacts what happens when they go home. It impacts what happens in their personal life, their relationship with their families, their children, etc. Right? So the impact of our leadership goes far beyond the walls of our company. The fundamental quality of a conscious leader is that they are selfless. What do we mean by that? What is the opposite of selfless? Is selfish. You cannot be a selfish human being and call yourself a leader, because that means you're going to use the people you lead as a means to achieving your personal goals. That is the definition of a tyrant. That is not a leader. A true leader is somebody who has transcended the self. They've gone beyond even self-actualization that Maslow talked about, to self-transcendence that Viktor Frankl talked about, right? That you go beyond your focus on just this narrow self, that you are now about serving something larger than yourself. And as Simon Sinek has said, in the military, They give medals to those who are willing to sacrifice themselves so others may gain. But in business, we give bonuses to those who are willing to sacrifice others so they may gain. That's the old approach on leadership, right? When it's all about money and the human cost is doesn't matter. Right? So that is not what conscious leadership is. Conscious leaders have gone beyond that and they are selfless. So selfless also is an acronym that stands for the qualities of conscious leaders. And it starts with strength. So leadership is never easy. Leadership is full of challenges. Every day you face enormous challenges, opposition, doubts. So you have to be a strong human being to be a leader. And strength I define in terms of moral courage, knowing what is right and having the courage to do what is right. I also define it in terms of personal power, not positional power. Yes, you have a title, but even if you don't have that title, you still have power because of who you are as a human being, how integrated you are, your values, your purpose, everything about you is aligned. If you think about some of the great leaders in history like Gandhi, Mahatma Gandhi in India, he never had a title in his life. He never won an election. He was never appointed to anything. And yet he had so much personal power that he literally brought down the British Empire, right, by bringing about India's independence. So it's personal power you cultivate. And it's power over and not power with. In order for you to be powerful, you do not have to steal power from those you lead. You actually empower the people that you lead, and all of that becomes a collective power that we can use to do great things. So again, you start with strength. You have to have strength. And then enthusiasm, energy, health and vitality, and being connected to a deeper sense of purpose. That will give you tremendous energy that other people don't have access to. You know, that is almost an infinite source. Because you're so passionate about what you're trying to do in the world, you feel this sense of urgency that I have work to do, right? It's important that we do what we're doing. And so there's a great enthusiasm that is infectious that other people can also see and learn from. And very importantly, you have to come from a place of love and care and not fear and insecurity. And that combination is very critical. You have to have strength and love together. Strength without love is tyranny. In the last century, we had many very strong leaders, Hitler and Stalin and Mao and Mussolini. These were very, very strong leaders, but they were not coming from love. And they almost destroyed human civilization and they caused unbelievable amounts of suffering, right? So strength without love is tyranny, but love without strength is ineffective. We need to marry strong and love together, right? That combination is what we really have to aspire to as leaders. The leaders who did change the world for the better, Lincoln, Gandhi, Nelson Mandela, Martin Luther King, Mother Teresa, they are very strong and coming from love. And that combination is what moves humanity forward. Then we have flexibility, that we have to be able to show up as a leader, just like as a parent. You have to show up with different energy in different times. You can't always use the same approach. So as a leader, you need to have a range of things that you embody, actually, which I will talk about in a minute, right? The 4 different energies that we can have. And then we need to show up with the right energy in the right situation. You're staying true to yourself, but you're also showing a different side of yourself in that situation. You can be tough, you can be loving, right? You can be joyful or you can have wisdom, whatever is needed in that situation. Conscious leaders take a long-term orientation. It goes beyond the amount of time that you will be a leader. Most CEOs in the US are 3 to 5 years. So it doesn't mean that you make all your decisions for the next 3 to 5 years because that's how you will be judged. No, you have to look at the longer term. It says that the success of a leader is truly judged by how the company does under the next leader, because that means you have created a system, right, that succeeds. But I would say it goes beyond that. You evaluate that in terms of your lifetime. And even beyond your lifetime. In the northeast of the US, we have the Iroquois Confederacy, which was a coalition of Native American tribes. And their principle was that leaders must think about the next 7 generations. Every decision has to be thought about with that long-term lens. And we need to do that today. Things that happen on a planetary level, some of those things take decades or centuries, but the consequences will be felt. And then the last three elements have to do with intelligence. You know, analytical intelligence is measured by the IQ test, and that obviously is important, but that is by no means enough. And some years ago, Daniel Goleman wrote a book about this, and this has become now a very well understood idea. The emotional intelligence is even more important than analytical intelligence. Understanding yourself, who you are, understanding each other, right? And that is something that can be cultivated. That can be grown dramatically. IQ is fixed. IQ can only go down, analytical intelligence, but emotional intelligence and then systems intelligence, understanding how things are integrated and they work together as an interconnected, interdependent system, that can also be learned and grown dramatically. And spiritual intelligence, understanding the role of meaning and purpose in your life as a leader and in the lives of the people you lead. So again, these three forms of intelligence can all be cultivated through programs like this, what we're going through right now, through the right teachers, right, through the right books. I mean, we have access to all of the wisdom that has been created by humanity, you know, on this planet at our fingertips, and we have all the resources we need to cultivate these types of intelligence. So just to reiterate that point about strength and love, as Martin Luther King said, we must be tough-minded and tender-hearted at the same time. It's not about one or the other. It's not about saying I'm a strong leader and I'm a loving leader. No, you need to be very strong and you need to be very loving, both at the same time. In fact, I would go beyond that. The summary phrase that we now use, and this is a book that I will write someday, that a conscious leader has to become the wise fool of tough love. What does that mean? You have the wisdom of the elder, sort of the divine energy, understanding meaning and purpose and transcendence and legacy, right? That is wisdom of the elder. But you also have the joy and the playfulness, the innocence, the creativity, and the laughter and humor of a child, the foolishness, the healthy inner child, right? So the healthy elder, the healthy child, and then of course the masculine and the feminine. So we need to integrate all four of these energies together. Elder energy, child energy, father energy, mother energy, all together within one yourself as a leader, right? And great exemplary leaders, Herb Kelleher embodied that, Dalai Lama embodies that, he gives tremendous wisdom, and then at the end he always giggles and he says, oh, otherwise I don't know, right? He's got a lightness of being to him. Desmond Tutu the same way, right? So again, you can look at this and we have assessments that you can understand. For me, my default tendency is to come from wisdom and from love. But what that means is that I need to work on foolishness and sort of the toughness, right? Projecting more personal power and toughness, ability to say no, etc. And somebody else might be the opposite. They might have those two very well developed and the others not. And each of these needs to be in a healthy way, right? Not just having the foolishness you can also have of an adolescent, which is selfish and self-indulgent and egotistical, right? So again, we need to cultivate all of these qualities to become a conscious leader. I'm going to actually focus on one of these leaders. Paul Polman did tremendous work at Unilever, and his successor, Alan Loeb, is continuing that tradition. Ray Anderson transformed the carpet industry at Interface Carpets. But I'm going to talk about a company that all of us know and we deal with every day. We're dealing with it right now, Microsoft, right? We're using Microsoft Teams. And Satya Nadella is the CEO. Relatively low profile. You don't hear about him the same way you hear about Jeff Bezos and others, right? But is a tremendous track record of his leadership. And he is the first conscious leader that Microsoft has had. Right. So what has Microsoft in its history had? They've had three leaders. Bill Gates was the founder around 75, became public in 86, and then he was the CEO for 14 years for Microsoft as a public company. And he had a strong sense of purpose. He had this vision, a computer on every desk. And that at the time that seemed crazy. Because when Microsoft started, computers were only inside big rooms, right? Mainframe computers. And he said, no, I want to bring this. It's like a bicycle. I mean, everybody should have this technology, right? He was very shrewd in terms of his strategy. He was very clever. Even you could say took advantage of some of his partners like IBM, right, for Microsoft to get ahead. It was a very arrogant culture that reflected his own persona. He's very, very brilliant, and he has no patience with anybody who's not as smart as he is. So if you give him an idea, he doesn't like it. That's the stupidest thing I ever heard. Get out of here, right? And so everybody in this company tried to become like a little Bill Gates, right? If I can be like Bill, that means that I belong here, right? So that was the culture that he created. And it was very successful. Over those 14 years, he went from zero to $250 billion in market cap. I think it was second only to General Electric at that time. So that's about almost $18 billion a year of market value created. I don't think any other leader until then had done anything like that, right? So very successful. And then he decides to leave and go to the foundation, and he hands off to Steve Ballmer. Steve Ballmer was sort of his right-hand man, more the operations guy, numbers guy, and he did not have a purpose. Why? Because the purpose of Microsoft was already achieved. A computer on every desk was virtually a reality already by that time. So there was no inspiration left in that purpose. So now the purpose financial. It was all about revenue and profits, right? Selling as many Windows and Microsoft Office and all of that. There was no clear strategy other than to continue doing more of what we're doing. And the other things that he tried, the whole mobile phone revolution was missed by Microsoft. They came out of Windows Phone years later. They bought Nokia when Nokia was almost a dead company. So there was no clear strategy. There was a culture that reflected Steve Ballmer, which was very belligerent. He was like a street fighter. He would jump up and down. He would yell and scream at people. And in those 14 years, he only created $52 billion of additional value, about 3.7, down from 20 billion a year under Gates, right? And you can see it had to do with him as a leader. There's a video that when you get this presentation, you can click on that shows him jumping up and down on stage and yelling and screaming and trying to fire up the troops, right? They used to put the logo of their biggest competitor on the stage every year at the annual meeting, and he would take a sledgehammer and destroy that logo and say, we need to kill these guys, right? That was the energy inside Microsoft. In fact, on the web, you will find people would joke about the organizational chart of Microsoft under Steve Ballmer. It looked like these vertical silos with guns pointed at each other, right? You had the operating system people and you had the application, and there was no cooperation at all. Every one of them was simply told, maximize your profits and maximize your earnings, right? Don't do anything outside of that. So that was the Ballmer way. And then they brought in Satya Nadella. Right. So now this purpose, as I said, Gates's purpose was already achieved. The company had missed the smartphone explosion, which became a dominant industry in the world. Microsoft was like a threatened kingdom. Right. It looked like they were dying now. This was the end of that empire. Employees had no motivation, no inspiration. They were tired and frustrated. They were sick and they were losing their soul. And so he came in and he asked the fundamental questions like we're asking in this program. Why does our company exist? Why does it need to exist? What is our role in the world? And then why am I as a leader here in doing this job, right? And now if you look at his track record, he's been CEO for 6.5 years. He came up with a new purpose to empower every person and every organization on the planet to achieve more, right? And create all kinds of extraordinary tools and technologies to enable them to do that. He developed a very, very strong strategy where they were completely not playing a player in the cloud business. He went from 0 to $50 billion in revenues now in the cloud business in just a few years. He created a whole strategy around mobile. He sold off the Nokia, while losing money, but created a whole different strategy around that. Most importantly, he brought in an empathetic culture. In his first meeting with his leadership team, he shared about his own challenges. He shared about his special needs son, about his sister who had died when she was a young child. He showed up as an authentic human, and he invited them to connect to each other at that level. And that empathy became the hallmark of the Microsoft culture and a growth mindset, right? Everybody learning and growing, not just saying I'm an expert in this or that. And if you look at today's valuation of Microsoft, it is over $1.8 trillion, just behind Apple. It is extraordinary that he has created $1.5 trillion of market value, 235 billion every year. Incremental market value, what Bill Gates did in 14 years, he's doing every single year. I don't think any other company in the history of the world has done anything even 1/5 of this, is what Microsoft has achieved under this leadership. And this book I strongly recommend, hit refresh. My passion, he says, is to put empathy at the center of everything we pursue, from the products we launch to the new markets we enter to the employees, customers, and partners we work with. My primary job is to curate our culture so that 100,000 inspired minds can better shape our future. My approach is to lead with a sense of purpose and pride in what we do, not envy or combativeness. That was under Ballmer. I go, like, why are we not a player in the phone business? How can we destroy our competitor and take their business? So this journey that you are on is a very important journey. You cannot have a healthy society without conscious business. Okay, if the business sector is operating in the old way, you cannot actually hope to create a healthy, functioning society. And of course, we know you cannot have a conscious business without a conscious leader. And you cannot be a conscious leader if you're not a conscious human being. Right? So this journey is about you working on yourselves. All of us are on this journey, working on ourselves to become more and more and more conscious every day, right, for the rest of our lives. And we know that the consciousness of the leader can limit the consciousness of the organization. In many cases, it puts like a ceiling on it. And if the leader gets stuck, the organization will get stuck, right? So this is a lifelong journey that we are starting now, becoming more conscious. And the fact is, everybody can become a more conscious leader. It's a more conscious leader, right? There's some people who are way more conscious than I am or you are, but I can be more conscious today than I was yesterday, and everybody can actually do that. What it takes is intentionality, having that intention to do so, a commitment, it's a practice, and accountability, holding yourself accountable to that. And ultimately, you must embody, manifest that which we are talking about. Whatever we're trying to bring about, as Gandhi said, you must be the change you wish to see in the world. Right? That has to show up in your life and in your being. And I want to remind you of the framing that Neha had provided us early on in the program, which influenced me a lot in how to think about this. It starts with healing yourself so that we can serve the collective, and through that we can impact the world, right? So healing myself as a leader so we can serve the organization, our company, in a more powerful way, and then impact the leader. So that's our triple vision, right? Heal me, serve we, change the world. And the more we have ambitions to serve at a higher level and impact the world at a greater level, the more we have to go deeper inside ourselves. And healing ourselves is a never-ending journey. Every single one of us, I'm going through that right now as I'm writing my next book, is understanding my own life and my journey and what traumas I had and what I need to continue to work on. And we think about that in terms of immediate, short-term, as well as long-term. So our goal at the end of this, and we don't never fully get there, but it's a worthy goal, to get full alignment. Right? What we say, who we are, what we do, our purpose, our values, our behavior, every aspect of our life, not just at work, but at home, in the community, every dimension of my life is fully aligned. And I do want to remind you of a resource that you have, and we strongly recommend actually, that you in fact do that, the Leadership Circle profile. I think you have the links to their website, and you can take a self-assessment there and understand your own tendencies as a leader today, right? And if you go further, you can also get other people who have experienced your leadership. So this is a 360 profiling system. Other people who can also then give their experience of you in terms of how you show up as a leader, right? And it's a very important developmental tool. We looked at all of the major 360s, there are quite a few of them. This is the one that is the most strongly aligned with consciousness and with conscious leadership. So we again strongly urge you to do that. This looks complicated, but it's actually elegantly simple, I would say, as most important things are. There's the upper half and the bottom half, right? The upper half is creative, the bottom is reactive. So the top, I would say, is conscious action, and the bottom is unconscious reaction. Right? So we all operate with some degree of unconsciousness that we don't know why, but we do certain things. That's our reactive tendencies. But then when we are conscious, we are actually in a creative mode, right? So the upper half is creative and the bottom is reactive. Left is relational and the right is task oriented. So left focuses more on people and interpersonal, and the right focuses on the tasks, right? So those are the 4 quadrants of this. And within that, you have about 30 different subcategories. There are 18 dimensions of the creative half up here, and there are about 12 down here. And you answer a bunch of questions in about 20 minutes, and it'll give you a profile and tell you where you are today on these things. Right? And then if you look at it dividing into 4 quadrants, you can see that you have the creative. Within that, you have people creative and task creative. So I'm creative in terms of my relationships, right? And I'm creative in terms of what I do, the task. And then you have people reactive, how I react to other people, and then task reactive, right? And it will then also show you the connection to this. So we had this in our presentation with Bob Anderson, the developer of this tool. So they have done about 500,000 of these now over the years. And they have come up with correlations with leadership effectiveness and with financial performance of how you do on different aspects of this. Right? So if you look at the broad categories of what it means to be creative here, relating, that has to do with interpersonal, right? And there are multiple dimensions within this. There's an 85% correlation between that and leadership effectiveness, and also with performance of the business, right? 76%, 0.76, if you remember your statistics, right? 0.76 correlation, very high, between self-awareness and leadership effectiveness, 0.78 with authenticity, 0.84 with systems awareness. So you can see it brings in all of the different dimensions, right? There's purpose, there's relationships, there's meaning, legacy, systems, all of those things are in here. And achieving, a focus on achieving. Obviously, you would expect that to be high, connected to leadership effectiveness. Then if you go on the other side, there are 3 dimensions to being reactive. One is complying, like not, just following the rules, following the ways we've already always done things, right? Not having your own opinion. There's a negative correlation there between that and leadership effectiveness, minus 0.63. Protecting, you're acting out of a sense of defensiveness, right? There's a negative 0.56, and then controlling. You're not empowering people, but you're trying to actually control them. There's a negative 0.41 there, right? So again, this is a very, very powerful developmental tool. It shines a light on the areas that we actually can and need to work on. And it can then, over time, you can do this again and see, wow, I'm shifting away out of reactive into these, and I'm cultivating these different qualities. In order to really do this well, you need to work with a qualified coach. And that is something I will very strongly recommend to you. In another program we're doing, every leader gets a coach, and they start with this assessment, and then you work over time on improving many of these capacities and tendencies. So that is something I strongly urge you and encourage you as a leader. It's almost we have a responsibility to do this kind of thing, because our leadership impacts everybody's life. And if we don't look at our blind spots, if we don't look at our reactive tendencies, we could be causing a lot of suffering. And we don't want to do that, right? So again, I strongly urge you to do this. And we have access to coaches who are fully certified in this methodology that we are happy to provide you details about.